What do you think a Trump presidency will mean for Canadians? Should Canadians be worried?
People keep saying that this hate wave that's moving across the West cannot hit Canada. And you are wrong. It is happening throughout the Western democracies. The working classes, especially the white working classes, feeling rightfully thrown under the bus and left behind, are reacting in ways that are shocking, in ways that I think are unfair, in ways that are unfortunate, and sometimes that are xenophobic and racist. It is happening all across the Western democracies, and it can happen in Canada too.
Your comments on election night really resonated with a lot of people. Can you just elaborate on what you meant by a white lash?
Sure. Listen, when I used the term white lash, what I said was this election was a white lash in part. They always take that part out, in part. The election was a repudiation of a lot of stuff in our country that should have been repudiated. The arrogance of the DC elite, this overhang of pollsters that think they know everything. But it also was in part a reaction of a certain part of our country against multiculturalism. You wouldn't have a Steve Bannon in the White House if there were not a strain of a racist, xenophobic sentiment growing in our country. And it found a home in the Trump campaign. And I will tell you that it can find a home in your country too if you don't stand up to it.
On that note, I'm sure you've seen the footage of the alt-right meeting in Washington with people giving the Nazi salute. What's your reaction to that?
Listen, the fact that we haven't even inaugurated the president, and we already have Nazis meeting openly in public and giving Nazi salutes talking about, Heil Trump, lets you know the level of irresponsibility of the Trump campaign, minimally. There has never been a candidate to run for office to run a more irresponsible, whether he is a racist or not. His campaign was the most irresponsible campaign in the history of our country, whipping up all kinds of antagonism, winking and nodding at Nazi groups. He has retweeted more white nationalists and Nazi groups than he's ever retweeted any civil rights groups. So if he says he's going to be a unifier today, he's got a long way to go to make up for that. We have a crisis in our country because the Trump phenomenon is two things. One thing is very, very good. Fighting for jobs, fighting for America to be back on its feet, all that is good, but it is marbled through with toxic crap that is completely offensive to everybody with a functioning brainstem on planet Earth. And we've got to be able to talk about both.
People are already ringing the alarm about possible conflicts of interests and other possible scandals in the Trump presidency. Do you see him actually surviving a 4-year term, or do you think he'll get out of there before that?
Listen, the Republican Party now has a challenge on its hands. They have the House, the Senate, and the White House. Whatever happens now, if 20 million people get thrown off of health care, that's on them. If Muslims and Latinos are attacked in our streets, as is happening right now, that's on them. And if they fail to hold Donald Trump to the same standards that they were hounding Hillary Clinton on, that's on them as well. And the whole world is watching. Listen, you have great Republican leaders in the United States. I mean, the problem you have now is people think that all the Republicans are like Trump, and that is not true. You have great governors, Kasich, great governor, Paul Ryan, who I disagree with on everything, is at least a capable leader and a responsible leader, but you now have Trump. And the Republican Party has to make a decision. Are they going to stay with Trump, or as his own base begins to crack up, are they going to stay with the American people? Do not forget, most of Trump's people, oh, well, he won handily. Hold on a second. He lost the popular vote. He did win the electoral vote. But when you look in the numbers, the people who voted for Trump don't like Trump. The people who voted for Trump don't trust Trump. The people who voted for Trump think he has the wrong temperament. They were just so desperate and so frustrated that they voted for change of any kind. But he does not have a mandate for the worst of his policies, and if he tries to do the worst, he will find out his own supporters will not back him.
What needs to change in the Democratic Party in order to, as you're saying, people who voted for Trump may not even like Trump? what needs to change the Democratic Party so that voters don't have to choose in the future between two candidates they don't like?
Look, a lot of Democrats thought this was going to be a referendum on some of the strains of bigotry you can find in parts of the Republican Party. It became a referendum on some of the elitism you can find in the Democratic Party. You have two parties in our country that both have major problems. The Democrats have allowed a safe haven for a kind of snobbery and elitism that is offensive to most of the country, and they won't admit it and they won't do anything about it. The Republicans have allowed a strain of bigotry. Not that every Republican's a bigot, but so many bigots feel comfortable in their party that it is now offensive to the people who are not a part of that party. So both parties have to deal with their elitism and the bigotry that's found a home there. And most Americans right now are just heartbroken about the whole thing. The worst possible thing you can say to any American right now is, you got Thanksgiving in 2 days. Because nobody wants to go home and have this fight around the kitchen table. The country is so divided over these two broken parties that nobody even wants to go home for Thanksgiving. I've got Muslim friends who are terrified. Muslim kids who are afraid to go to school. I've got Latino families that literally don't know if they should leave the country, what to do. This campaign was run in such an irresponsible manner that even if Donald Trump himself does not want the vigilante activity that's happening, it's happening. And this could get worse before it gets better. Every single part of civil society in Canada, United States, and around the world needs to get very vocal right now, needs to stand up right now and say, hands off Muslim women who are just doing nothing but walking down the street. Hands off the dreamers and other young immigrants who are not doing anything wrong but going to school and hoping to have a better life. Hands off of people of color who contribute so much to the West right now and frankly don't get paid fairly and don't get respected fairly in return. People are suffering enough. We don't need a hate wave on top of the pain and suffering that's already going on. And if anybody thinks they can just stand back and hope for the best, I'm going to give him a chance. Not give him in other words, I'll put it this way. If you think that standing back and giving this guy a chance means giving him a pass on stuff you wouldn't let your kids do, stuff you wouldn't let your next door neighbor's kids do, then you're not paying attention. Right is right and wrong is wrong. We are so far now past left versus right. This is no longer a left-right issue. This is a right-wrong issue. It is wrong for any political party to get ahead by picking on defenseless groups and small groups and minority groups, and then to turn your head when the violence comes. That is irresponsible. That's not left versus right. That's right versus wrong, and it's wrong.